All right, so jumping right into today's deep dive, we're tackling something that's bound to come up on your UPSC exams.
Oh, definitely.
Genetically modified crops in India.
Yeah.
Whether you're aiming for the prelims or prepping for those mains,
Right.
understanding this is crucial.
Absolutely.
And think agriculture, technology, even some
Yeah.
policy questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's all connected.
Yeah, GM crops, they touch upon so many different aspects of India's development,
Right.
food security, economic implications, even those ethical considerations.
Yeah.
Really a hot topic for policymakers and citizens alike.
So let's break it down before we get into like the nitty gritty of the Indian scenario.
Sure.
Can we just like start with the basics?
Okay.
What are genetically modified crops?
Yeah.
Like imagine you're explaining this to someone who's never heard of it before.
So basically, think of it this way. Scientists, they take a plant's DNA
Okay.
and they give it a little tweak, kind of like fine-tuning a recipe.
Got it.
So they're inserting genes for specific traits that wouldn't naturally occur. It's all about enhancing or introducing those desirable characteristics.
So like giving crops a superpower boost.
Exactly.
What kind of superpowers are we talking about?
So some common modifications include things like pest resistance.
Okay.
So like building in a natural defense against insects.
Got it.
This could mean that farmers might need fewer pesticides,
Right.
which is good for the environment and potentially our health too.
Makes sense.
Other modifications focus on things like boosting the nutritional value,
Okay.
which is huge for tackling malnutrition.
Right.
And then, of course, there's the potential for increasing yields,
Mm-hmm.
which is essential for feeding a growing population.
Wow. So GM crops seem like they could be a game changer,
Yeah.
especially for a country like India.
Mm,
But I'm guessing it's not all smooth sailing, right?
you're right. It's not a simple issue.
What are some of the concerns around this technology?
So one major concern revolves around biodiversity.
Okay.
Imagine these modified genes spreading to wild plants. Could that disrupt the natural balance of the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then there are those ongoing debates about potential long-term health effects.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while most of the research suggests that GM foods are safe, some experts remain cautious.
That makes sense. You gotta weigh the benefits against the risks.
Absolutely.
And speaking of weighing things out, how does India regulate all this?
Right.
Like the whole GM crop situation.
So India takes a pretty cautious approach.
Right.
The Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, they're the main authority.
Right.
They operate under the Environment Protection Act of 1986.
Got it.
And they have a specialized committee.
Okay.
It's called the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, or GEAC.
The GEAC.
Yes.
Okay.
And they scrutinize every single GM crop proposal.
So it's like a very rigorous screening process.
It is.
No hasty decisions.
No.
So what's the current status then
Yeah.
of GM crops in India?
Right.
Are there any being grown commercially?
So as of now, only one GM crop has been given the green light
Okay.
for commercial cultivation in India.
Okay.
That's Burt cotton.
Brute cotton.
It was introduced way back in 2002,
Okay.
and it's been widely adopted by farmers.
Got it.
But other proposed GM crops, like brinjal,
Right.
they face strong opposition and haven't made it past all those regulatory hurdles.
Interesting. So you have like one success story,
Right.
but the bigger picture is much more complicated.
Exactly.
For our UPSC aspirants, it's important to understand all the different sides of this, right?
Absolutely. It's crucial to be able to analyze both sides of the argument.
Okay.
So proponents of GM crops, they often highlight those potential benefits we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Increased yields, reduced reliance on pesticides,
Right.
enhanced nutritional value.
Okay.
They argue that these benefits are key to ensuring food security,
Mm-hmm.
especially in a country like India with a large and growing population.
Makes sense. I mean, feeding over 1 billion people, that's no easy feat.
Definitely not.
So what about the other side of the coin?
Yeah.
What do opponents of GM crops say?
So they raise concerns about potential long-term environmental risks,
Okay.
like the impact on biodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
the possibility of herbicide-resistant weeds emerging.
Okay.
They also worry about the economic implications,
Right.
particularly for small-scale farmers,
Mm-hmm.
and whether adopting GM crops could lead to dependence on these multinational corporations
Yeah.
who own the patents for those seeds.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
There is.
Environmental concerns,
Mm-hmm.
economic consideration,
Right.
even ethical questions.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
tampering with nature,
Absolutely.
the right of consumers to know what's in their food.
Right.
It's clear that India is treading cautiously,
Yes.
with Brake cotton being like the exception
Mhm.
rather than the rule.
Yeah. And to make things even more interesting,
Okay.
there have been some recent developments in India's regulatory framework for GM crops.
Ooh, a plot twist.
Exactly.
This is where things get juicy. What happened recently?
So back in July of 2023,
Okay.
the Supreme Court issued this directive.
Mhm.
They called for more transparency
Okay.
in how GM crops are assessed,
Right.
especially when it comes to potential conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest.
Yes, within the GEAC.
Oh, so like someone on the committee having ties to a big biotech company or something.
Exactly. There were concerns about whether those connections could actually influence decisions
Right.
on those GM crop approvals.
Yeah.
It's all about ensuring that those decisions are based on solid science and the best interests of the country.
Right. Not personal agendas.
Not personal agendas, exactly.
It makes sense. Transparency is key,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about something like food security.
Absolutely.
So what did this directive lead to?
So in response,
Okay.
the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change
Yeah.
introduced these new rules.
Okay.
Now, experts on the GEAC, they have to reveal any connections they have to companies or organizations involved in the matters being discussed.
Got it.
And they're also expected to recuse themselves
Okay.
from those discussions if there's a potential conflict of interest.
So more checks and balances.
Right.
Which is reassuring.
It is.
But it seems like this whole push for transparency stems from a specific controversy.
It does.
Our research mentioned something about GM mustard.
You're right on the money.
Okay.
So these new rules came about after the government gave conditional approval to a genetically modified mustard hybrid
Okay.
called DMH11.
DMH11?
Yes, back in 2022.
Okay.
It was developed by scientists right here in India
Got it.
to boost mustard oil production
Okay.
and reduce our reliance on imports.
DMH11. That name's definitely ringing a bell.
It is.
But things didn't exactly go smoothly, did they?
Not quite.
What happened?
So the Supreme Court
Yeah.
delivered a split verdict
The split verdict.
on the government's decision,
Yeah.
meaning there wasn't a clear consensus.
Oh, so it's still up in the air.
It's
Whether or not this DMH11 gets the green light
right.
for commercial cultivation.
Exactly. A classic case of the complexities surrounding GM crops in India.
It seems like every step forward with GM crops in India
Mm-hmm.
comes with its own set of challenges and controversies.
It does.
But this is such an important topic,
It is.
especially for those UPSC aspirants out there.
Absolutely.
Understanding how India is navigating this landscape is key
Yes.
for both prelims and mains.
For both, for sure. So for prelims,
Yeah.
knowing the basics about genetic modification,
Okay.
the different types of GM crops, and the key regulatory bodies in India, that's crucial.
And for the mains, this goes beyond just rote learning, right?
It does.
You might be asked to analyze the arguments for and against GM crops,
Right.
discuss their potential impact on India's agriculture sector,
Mm-hmm.
or even evaluate those ethical and socioeconomic considerations.
Exactly. This is where that critical thinking and understanding the nuances of the debate come into play.
It's not just about memorizing facts.
It's not.
It's about understanding those complexities and engaging with all those different perspectives.
Absolutely. The UPSC examiners, they're looking for candidates who can go beyond simply stating facts.
Right.
They want to see you analyze, evaluate, and form your own well-informed opinions.
So for all our listeners prepping for the UPSC,
Yes.
pay attention to these discussions.
Definitely.
It's not just about memorizing those facts,
Not.
but about understanding the complexities and engaging with all those different perspectives.
Absolutely. Now, before we delve further into the Indian context,
Okay.
I think it's important to broaden our perspective a little bit
Right.
and look at the global landscape of GM crops.
Okay.
It's fascinating how different countries have taken vastly different approaches
Right. To this technology.
to this technology. Yeah,
That's a great point. It's easy to get tunnel vision when you're just focusing on India.
it is.
But this is a global issue
Global issue for sure.
with implications for trade technology, even international relations.
Absolutely.
So what's the big picture?
Yeah.
What are the major trends we're seeing around the world when it comes to GM crops?
Well, you can broadly categorize countries into three groups.
Okay.
You have the enthusiastic adopters,
All right.
the cautious navigators,
Okay.
and the outright rejectors.
Got it.
So the U.S., for example, they're a major champion of GM crops.
Right.
They've been growing them commercially for decades.
Right.
And a huge percentage of their corn, soybean, and cotton crops are genetically modified.
So they've gone all in on the GM technology.
They have.
It's interesting to see how different countries have such varying levels of acceptance.
It is.
What about the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah.
Which countries have said absolutely not to GM crops?
So many European countries have been much more hesitant,
Okay.
primarily driven by public concerns about those potential health and environmental risks.
Hmm.
Some, like France and Germany, they've banned certain GM crops outright,
Oh.
while others, like Italy, have adopted stricter regulatory approaches.
So it seems like public perception plays a huge role in shaping policy decisions.
It does.
What about the countries in the middle?
Right.
Where does India fit into this global picture?
So India falls somewhere in between.
Okay.
We haven't embraced GM crops with the same enthusiasm as the U.S.,
All right.
but we haven't shut them out completely either.
Right. We do have the buy cotton.
We do remember we have bite cotton being cultivated commercially,
Right.
which has been a significant development for our cotton industry.
Yeah.
But as we've discussed, the approval process for other GM crops is quite rigorous,
Hmm.
with a strong emphasis on evaluating those potential risks before granting approval.
It makes sense that India is taking a more cautious approach,
Right.
given our unique context.
Absolutely. We have such diverse agricultural practices, a large population of smallholder farmers,
Right.
and a rich biodiversity to consider.
Yeah, so looking at the global experience,
Mm,
what are some key lessons that India can learn from other countries
right.
that have grappled with these GM crop dilemmas?
That's a crucial question. One key takeaway
Yeah.
is the importance of having robust and transparent regulatory frameworks.
Okay.
Countries that have successfully incorporated GM crops into their agricultural systems,
Hmm.
they have those clear guidelines for risk assessment,
Okay.
approval processes, and post-release monitoring.
Right.
Transparency is vital for building public trust as well.
Hmm.
Open communication about the science, the potential benefits and risks.
Okay.
And those regulatory decisions being made can help alleviate those public anxieties
Right.
and encourage that informed dialogue.
That makes a lot of sense. Transparency and public engagement are key
They are.
to responsible innovation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What other lessons can we draw
Yeah,
from the global experience with GM crops?
exactly.
Another important lesson is the need for comprehensive risk assessment.
Okay.
This means looking beyond just the environmental and health impacts
Right.
to consider those socioeconomic implications as well.
So how will adopting GM crops affect smallholder farmers?
Exactly.
Could it lead to greater concentration in the agricultural sector?
Right.
Will it impact traditional farming practices and biodiversity?
Exactly. These are all crucial questions that need to be thoroughly addressed.
It's not just about the science then,
That's not.
but about understanding those broader social and economic consequences.
Yes. It's about ensuring that any technological advancements
Mm-hmm.
benefit all stakeholders,
Right.
not just a select few.
Not just a select few.
Right. And finally, it's essential to remember that the debate around GM crops is constantly evolving.
Right. Because new research is emerging.
Exactly. As new technologies are developed, staying up to date
Mm.
on those latest scientific findings
Yeah.
and engaging in ongoing dialogue with stakeholders from all sides of the issue
Right.
is crucial for making informed decisions about the role of GM crops
Okay.
in our food and agricultural systems.
So it's a dynamic landscape.
It is.
We need to be adaptable and informed to navigate it effectively
For sure.
by carefully considering the experiences of other countries,
Yes.
promoting transparency in decision-making,
Mm-hmm.
and engaging in continuous dialogue.
Yeah.
India can make those informed choices about the role of GM crops in its future.
I couldn't agree more. It's about finding that right balance,
Mm-hmm.
weighing the potential benefits against those potential risks,
Yeah.
and making sure that any decisions serve the best interests of the nation,
Right.
our farmers, and the environment.
Now let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
and bring the conversation back to the specific context of India.
Right.
We've talked about the potential benefits of GM crops in terms of increasing yields
Right.
and reducing pesticide use.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the specific challenges
Yeah.
India faces when it comes to food security and agriculture?
Right.
And could GM crops potentially play a role in addressing those challenges?
That's a great question, and it's really at the heart of the GM crop debate in India.
Okay.
You know, we have a rapidly growing population to feed.
Right over 1 billion people.
Exactly. And our agricultural sector faces a multitude of challenges.
Like what?
Shrinking land holdings,
Okay.
climate change impacts,
Mm-hmm.
water scarcity,
Yeah,
declining soil fertility.
that's a lot.
All of these factors put immense pressure
Right.
on our ability to produce enough food,
To meet the needs of the people.
to meet the nutritional needs of our people. Exactly.
So the stakes are incredibly high.
They are.
Could GM crops be part of the solution? to these pressing challenges?
So proponents of GM crops argue that they have the potential to address some of these issues head on.
Okay.
They point to the success of GM cotton in India,
Right.
which has led to a significant boost in yields
Hmm.
and a reduction in pesticide use.
Oh,
They argue that similar successes could be replicated with other crops like rice, wheat, and pulses,
which are staples in the Indian diet.
which are staples in the Indian diet, exactly.
That sounds promising,
Yeah.
but as we've discussed,
Yes.
there are concerns as well. What are some of the specific concerns about adopting GM crops
Right.
within the Indian context?
So one major concern is the potential impact on biodiversity.
Yeah.
India is a center of origin for many crops
Right.
and boasts a rich diversity of plant varieties.
Mhm.
Opponents of GM crops worry that introducing genetically modified varieties could lead to the displacement of traditional varieties,
Okay.
eroding this valuable biodiversity.
That's a really important point. Protecting our biodiversity is crucial,
It is.
not just for ecological reasons,
Right.
but also for cultural and economic reasons.
Absolutely.
We need to be mindful of those potential unintended consequences
Yes.
of introducing new technologies.
We do. Another concern revolves around the impact on smallholder farmers.
Okay.
A significant portion of Indian farmers
Mhm.
work on small plots of land
Right.
and rely on traditional farming methods.
Yeah.
There's a worry that introducing GM crops, especially those with patented seeds,
Right.
could increase the cost of farming,
Yeah.
making it difficult for those smallholders to compete.
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
We need to ensure that any technological advancements in agriculture
Yes.
benefit all farmers, not just larger scale operations.
Right.
It's about promoting inclusive growth
Yes.
and ensuring that no one gets left behind.
Exactly. And then there are concerns about the impact on consumer choice.
Right.
Many consumers in India are wary of GM foods, and
Yeah.
they want the right to know if the food they're consuming contains GM ingredients.
Yeah.
The lack of clear labeling requirements for GM foods
Hmm.
is a point of contention.
So it's a complex issue with many factors to consider.
It is.
It seems like finding a way to harness those potential benefits of GM technology
Right.
while addressing these legitimate concerns is the key challenge.
It is. It's about striking a balance
Mhm.
between innovation and responsibility.
Exactly.
It requires open and honest conversations, conducting those thorough risk assessments,
Hmm.
and making decisions that prioritize the well-being of all stakeholders.
Right.
It's about finding solutions that work for India,
Hmm.
not just imposing solutions from elsewhere.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to touch upon a topic we briefly mentioned earlier,
Right.
those socioeconomic implications
Yes.
of GM crops in India.
Of GM crops in India.
We talked about the potential impact on smallholder farmers,
We did.
but what about the broader economic considerations?
Right.
What are some key economic factors surrounding the adoption of GM crops in India?
That's a great question. The economic implications of GM crops in India are multifaceted
Okay.
and often intertwined with social and political factors.
Mm-hmm.
One key consideration is the potential impact
All right.
on agricultural productivity and food security.
Okay.
Proponents of GM crops argue that these technologies can lead to increased yields,
Right.
lower production costs, and reduced food waste,
Makes sense.
all of which contribute to a more secure and sustainable food system.
That sounds promising, but what are the counter-arguments?
If-
Are there any potential drawbacks
Right.
from an economic perspective?
So critics often point out that focusing on GM crops might divert resources and attention
Okay.
away from other crucial aspects of agricultural development,
Such as?
such as improving irrigation systems, soil health,
Okay.
and access to credit for those smallholder farmers.
Got it.
They argue that a more holistic approach to agricultural development is needed,
Okay.
one that addresses the underlying structural issues facing the sector.
So it's not just about introducing new technologies.
Not.
It's about creating a supportive ecosystem
Right.
that enables farmers to thrive.
Exact. Another key economic consideration is the issue of seed sovereignty.
Seed sovereignty. Okay.
GM crops are often associated with patented seeds,
Right.
which can give multinational corporations significant control over the seed supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Critics worry that this could lead to a situation
Okay.
where Indian farmers become dependent on these companies for their seeds,
Right.
potentially driving up costs and reducing their autonomy.
That's a valid concern. Control over seeds is fundamental to food security,
It is.
and we need to be mindful of the implications of adopting technologies that might erode that control.
Absolutely. And finally, there's the issue of trade and market access.
Okay.
India is a major agricultural producer,
Right.
and our exports play a significant role in the global food system.
Yeah.
The adoption of GM crops could have implications for our access to certain export markets,
Okay.
as some countries have restrictions on GM products.
So it's a complex web of interconnected factors.
It is.
Economic considerations, social implications, environmental concerns, trade dynamics,
Right.
all come into play when we're talking about GM crops in India.
Precisely. And navigating this complexity requires a nuanced understanding of the issues, a willingness to engage in open dialogue with all stakeholders,
Right.
and a commitment to making decisions that prioritize the long-term well-being of our nation.
Okay.
It's about finding solutions that are both pragmatic and principled.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive,
We have.
exploring the global landscape of GM crops, examining the specific challenges and opportunities for India,
Right.
and delving into the socio-economic implications of this technology.
But there's still more to explore.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yes.
So in the previous parts, we really dug into the complexities of genetically modified crops in India, exploring everything from the science to the global landscape, and even those crucial socioeconomic considerations.
Yes, we did.
Now, in this final part,
Right.
we're going to zoom in on some specific case studies,
Okay.
get a first-hand look at those heated controversies
Yeah.
surrounding GM crops in India.
All right.
And for our UPSC aspirants, this is where the rubber meets the road.
It is.
Understanding these real-world examples is key for tackling those exam questions.
You're absolutely right. Examining specific cases helps us grasp those nuances of this debate. The challenges of balancing those potential benefits with very real concerns.
It's this kind of in-depth analysis that will set you apart in your UPSC exams.
Okay, so let's dive into our first case study.
Right.
Our research mentioned a lot of buzz around Brit cotton.
Yeah.
What's the story there?
So Brit cotton is indeed a fascinating case study.
Okay.
It was the first genetically modified crop to be commercially cultivated in India
Right.
back in 2002.
2002.
The Brit stands for Bacillus thuringiensis.
Bacillus thuringiensis.
It's a soil bacterium that produces a protein toxic to certain insects,
Okay.
particularly bollworms. These pesky little creatures that love to munch on cotton crops.
So scientists essentially engineered the cotton plant to produce this toxin itself,
They did.
turning it into its own insecticide.
Right.
It's like giving the plant its own defense mechanism.
Precisely. And the results have been pretty dramatic.
Okay.
Brit cotton is widely credited with boosting cotton yields significantly,
All right.
reducing pesticide use, and even increasing farmer incomes.
India went from being a net importer of cotton to becoming one of the world's largest cotton exporters.
That's a pretty impressive success story.
It is.
Sounds like a win-win situation for farmers and the environment.
It does, but
But I'm guessing it can't all be positive.
gross. There's always another side to the story.
What are some of the challenges or drawbacks to consider?
So one concern with Brit cotton has been the emergence of insect resistance
Resistance, okay.
to the Brit toxin.
So they're adapting.
Over time, pests can develop resistance to any pesticide,
Right.
whether it's synthetic or naturally derived.
It's like when we overuse antibiotics
Exactly.
and bacteria become resistant,
Right.
we create a solution and nature finds a way to adapt.
It's a constant evolutionary arms race.
What are the implications of this resistance developing in bollworms?
So it highlights the importance of integrated pest management strategies.
Okay.
Relying solely on one solution, even one as seemingly effective as Brit cotton, can backfire.
Right.
Farmers need to diversify their pest control methods.
Rotate crops and adopt other sustainable practices to prevent resistance from taking hold.
So Brit cotton is a powerful tool,
It is.
but not a magic bullet.
Right.
It needs to be part of a broader, more holistic approach to agriculture and pest management.
Exactly.
This is a key takeaway for our UPSC aspirants.
It is.
Understanding these complexities is crucial
Yes.
for crafting well-rounded answers.
Absolutely. Now moving on to another controversial case.
Okay.
GM mustard.
Yes. This is the DMH11 variety
Yes.
that's been stuck in a regulatory tug-of-war.
It has.
It seems like every few months there's a new development in this saga.
Exactly. DMH11 is a genetically modified mustard hybrid
Okay.
developed by scientists right here in India,
In India.
designed to increase mustard oil production,
Okay.
which is a staple in many Indian kitchens.
Right.
The goal is to reduce our dependence on imported edible oils
Okay.
and boost domestic production.
So it's about achieving self-sufficiency in a key food item.
It's a goal that resonates deeply with India's developmental aspirations.
Absolutely. But as we've touched upon earlier, this case has been incredibly contentious.
Yeah. So what are the main sticking points that have kept DMH11 in limbo for so long?
So, like with many GM crops, there are concerns about potential environmental risks.
Okay.
Some studies have raised concerns about the impact on honeybees,
Honeybees.
which are vital pollinators for mustard.
Right.
There are also worries about the use of herbicide-tolerant genes in DMH11,
Right.
which could lead to increased herbicide use
Right.
and potentially harm biodiversity.
Yeah.
And then there are those broader concerns about seed sovereignty
Right.
and the influence of multinational corporations
Okay.
over the seed supply.
So it's a multifaceted issue with valid points on all sides.
It is.
Environmental concerns, economic considerations, and even those deeper questions about control over our food systems.
Absolutely.
It's no wonder this case has sparked such heated debates.
It has. These concerns have led to legal challenges and protests, stalling the commercial release of DMH11. Despite receiving conditional approval from the government,
Right.
the Supreme Court, as we discussed, delivered a split verdict,
The split verdict again.
leaving the final decision to a future bench.
It's a real cliffhanger.
Yes.
It's almost like a courtroom drama playing out in real life.
Yeah.
The GM mustard case really highlights just how complex and emotionally charged this issue is in India.
It does.
It's not just about the science, but about values, livelihoods, and visions for the future of Indian agriculture.
Absolutely. It touches upon those fundamental questions about food security,
Yeah.
environmental sustainability, and the role of technology in shaping our agricultural landscape.
Right.
And it underscores the need for those open, transparent, and science-based decision-making processes that
Okay.
involve all stakeholders.
Right. It's about finding solutions that work for India, not just imposing solutions from elsewhere.
Exactly.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners, especially those burning the midnight oil for the UPSC, with some food for thought.
Okay.
What does the crystal ball show for GM crops in India?
Right.
Where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question. The future of GM crops in India is uncertain,
Okay.
but full of potential.
Right.
One thing is clear, the debate is far from over.
Yeah, I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
It's not, as our population continues to grow and climate change intensifies.
Right.
The pressure to increase food production sustainably will only mount.
So we need to be prepared to adapt and innovate.
Exactly. GM crops could potentially be part of the solution,
Okay.
but their adoption will require careful consideration of both the risks and the benefits.
Yeah.
We need those robust regulatory frameworks, transparent engagement with all stakeholders, and a commitment to making decisions that prioritize the long-term well-being of our nation and its people.
And perhaps most importantly, we need to foster a culture of scientific literacy and critical thinking, enabling informed decision-making that serves the best interests of India.
It's about empowering citizens to understand the complexities of these issues
Right.
and participate in shaping the future of our food systems.
I couldn't agree more so. To our listeners, stay informed.
Yes.
Engage in thoughtful discussions and form your own opinions on this complex and ever-evolving issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Your voice matters.
And if you found this deep dive helpful in navigating the intricate world of GM crops in India, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share it with your fellow UPSC warriors.
Yeah, share it with your friends.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating topic, ready to equip you with the knowledge you need to conquer those exams and become informed citizens. Until then, happy learning.